And a warm welcome for our moderator, Ralph Simon, Chairman of Mobilium Global.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see you here because this is probably the centrally most important event in digital entertainment world. It's more important than any other session that's been on. And the reason I know that with such certainty is that this is definitely the only session where you will see somebody whose soul is red. Now, how many of you would have the balls to wear shoes like that, even at Digital Entertainment World? Not bad. Not a bad start. So it's a great, great honor and privilege to welcome Nolan Bushnell to the stage. Nolan, who lives in Los Angeles, is somebody who...
I actually live in the future.
In where?
In the future.
In the future. That is true. That is true. But why this is so important is that Ned Sherman and the Digital Entertainment World team always like to get somebody who absolutely represents the very bleeding edge of the leading edge of the future. So Nolan, great to have you here. I'm glad to see that you're wearing the right cap for the occasion. Modal VR. This is a company that you started recently. For those of you that have never been exposed to or know about Nolan, Nolan has a long-standing career. There are usually three things people remember about Nolan. Number one, he started Atari and the Pong game, which was one of the very first of the video games. Secondly, he formulated what was way ahead of its time, the first digital restaurant called Chuck E. Cheese, which I'm sure you, when you were younger, ate some pizza there and saw a digital screen for the first time. And thirdly, he has the history of having actually employed Steve Jobs and putting him on the night shift rather than the day shift for a whole variety of reasons. But you were responsible for hiring Steve Jobs.
I was.
You were. So that trinity of key accomplishments is just a tiny part of what we're going to be talking about today. So Nolan, first of all, your belief in VR, your reason for really going into this boots and all, what is the reason for that?
Reality sucks. What you really want to be able to do is have an ability to change and control the horizontal and the vertical, the pyro and theta. You want to fundamentally be able to construct in software any life you wish. But more than that, it's just, VR is a trick. Let me go through a few of my slides here.
Great.
Just for fun.
Great.
And I always like this. If you can't believe Albert, who can you believe? And it's a trick. And this was a trick that was started in the old days with the early magic lanterns. People would run out screaming because they thought that these were really bad people that had come to life. And this, just through this stuff. And that wasn't very good technology. I like to say that VR right now is at the Pong phase of virtual reality. And when I think about where Pong was to today's images, real time, that's really cool. And in the next 20 years, we are going to have indistinguishability. Right now, we are at parity with scent. You can smell pine, and you can't tell whether it's coming from an actual pine needle or whether it's coming from a synthetic. They even had smell-o-vision and scratch and sniff. And then this is even a VR headset that does the whole thing. But there's also first 3D images. Now those were pretty lame, but we thought it was cool. ViewMaster, Oculus, Fantasia. This was where they really invented surround sound. It was cool stuff. And I'm just trying to put this in concept of where we were going. I played my first video game on a big computer. And all I really did was make it commercial. So, if you really wanted the inventor of the video game here, it'd be Steve Russell from MIT in 1962. Not me. I was just a commercial boffin. Two wonderful innovations here, Pong and the polka dot shirt. Polka dot shirt didn't...
That's you there in the polka dot shirt?
Yeah. I had shaved my beard off for that occasion. There's various things and other stuff. Of course, remember Doom? That was cool. And now we have this. I mean, is that a photograph or is that a computer construct? It's really where we go. And then we have haptics. I got to tell you, we thought that it'd be fun to give people a shock playing tank when you got hit. And it turned out that we thought, well, maybe people won't want to. We could have put a switch on. People either went max shock, max pain, or they went to nothing, zero pain. But the game earned half of what one that didn't have that feature on. Why? You didn't want to be shocked, but you didn't want to be a wimp. You know, so you learn a little bit about these things.
You mentioned the word haptics.
Yes.
Why is haptics and the whole question of, or the subject of haptics, explain, if you will, what that is to those that are not familiar with haptics, such a vital form for today.
It's absolutely imperative that your virtual reality matches as much of the physicality as you can. Motion sickness comes when your inner ear expects certain accelerations that don't happen. And like, has anybody here been on a VR coaster? Amazing. You know, because what the VR coaster does is it maps the accelerations onto the image, and it makes it real. I mean, how many of you have been on a runaway mine train that jumps the tracks, lands on the back of a dragon, then you can feel the wings flapping and making vibrations in the car? That's fun. And, you know, there's nothing like riding a dragon if you don't get killed. And that's the promise of VR.
So, well, you voiced this, let's take a traditional roller coaster, but if you look at the modern configuration of this, where you're blending VR with existing amusement park rides. Now, in the United States, there are approximately 400 major amusement parks. We're talking about Six Flags, Disneyland, the rest around the country, 1,000 around the world, probably 600 rest of the world, a lot now in Asia Pacific.
Right.
Is the idea now for the blending together of VR onto, let's say, a roller coaster ride, such that you wear a head-mounted display device while you're sitting in the roller coaster, but that gives you the passageway into the VR experience? Explain that.
Absolutely. Well, there's a company in Germany that's the #1 roller coaster company, and
What are they called?
It's called MAC.
MAC.
And they also own Europark, which is, okay, now this is going to baffle you. Europark is a better amusement park than Disney World.
Why is that?
Just got better stuff. You know, and they're winning all the awards right now. So if the next time you want to go play big time, go to Europark. It's in southern Germany, and okay, Christmas time in Germany, the weather's not wonderful, but I had one of the best amusement park experiences I had for a long time at the Europark in January. What's happening there? I mean, it's a whole...
What was the experience that you had?
Great rides, great experiences. The VR coaster, I rode on a dragon there. And it's, the whole park is lit up like my neighbor's house. I have a neighbor that goes hog-ass wild around Christmas time. And so I think that's one thing. The other part that we're going to be doing is we've got this world where we can create synthetic worlds. what better way to use VR than to scare the shit out of you? You know, Halloween is going to be our meat. I can tell you right now that I can scare you in VR the way that you've never been scared before. It's going to be amazing. It actually harkens back to my childhood when I got into trouble with the neighborhood parents when I just scared the little trick-or-treaters with my antics. I had a ghost that flew down out of a tree on a rope and said, "Woo!" And the poor little kids were traumatized. But anyway, that's another story.
So, Nolan, when you mentioned this company, Mack, they are now seen globally as the premier constructors of roller coaster rides. Of consequence, or what?
What?
Why do you place so much value on that German company? Is that because they are one of the vanguards of the future of this whole new world of amusement using VR?
I think so. And plus, there's the wonderful thing about German engineering is that I feel pretty safe when I'm sitting on something that's been made from a German company.
Right.
You know, like, not to be brutal, but there are certain countries that if they designed a roller coaster, I wouldn't get near it.
That's right. You don't want to go on the Italian roller coaster, rather go on a Swiss or a German roller coaster.
Right.
One of the people that you've been spending a lot of time working with is a game designer that really complements many of the ideas, intellectual and technological, that you bring in, and that's a guy by the name of Jason Crawford.
Jason.
Tell us about Jason.
Jason is maybe one of the smartest guys I know, and he's my partner as opposed to
in modal VR.
In modal VR, and in fact, Jason really developed the core technology. I feel a little bit like I'm an interloper, but when I saw what he'd been able to accomplish, I said, let's build a company around this thing, and he said, okay, and so all of a sudden we've got maybe, no, it's not maybe, I hate weasel words. We have the best VR company in the world by a factor of 10. And we will control the out-of-home space. We're not going to compete with Oculus or Sony or anything like that, but we will totally control the mall space, the family entertainment center space, and we will be training police departments and training videos or training experiences for offshore oil platforms. We will allow city planners to walk through their city before they dig a hole. This is what we can do. We can track you over the size of a football field or a full city. It takes a little more setup. We can set up, tear down in 15 minutes, and that's really key. Track to within 10 centimeters, 10 people in the construct. We maybe can get that up a little bit, or we can put it in a few thousand square feet in a mall. And the whole idea there is most people in the world will experience VR, truly good VR, for the first time in a amusement center mall.
In a public environment.
Yeah. And of course, we're going to have guns, stuff. I'd like to put on this slide because I think it's an interesting important. What is the Turing test of VR? And that is when VR is indistinguishable from reality. And in some ways, I think that we're there with smell, we're pretty close and convincing with sound, and we're okay with light, but not great. But in terms of this organ that we have, which covers our whole body, pressure sensitive, pain, temperature, that's really hard. And Jim, what will break the Turing test for virtual reality? Eating.
Eating?
Yeah.
Eating, why is that?
Basically, you have texture, which says there's going to be touch. There's taste. Can simulate certain taste things. Smell. And then the whole idea of swallowing. I mean, how can I simulate stuff going down and filling me up? It's going to be hard. But there may be an answer, wetware, where we're injected with a brain interface, blob of cells, goo, that contain an API. And instead of having this great big jack on the back of your head like Neo in Matrix, we'll just have our brains synthetically on the cloud.
So Nolan, you mentioned, I'm just trying to process this better. You mentioned situational VR, and you spoke about a police force. And obviously, as a training mechanism, VR has got unbelievable potential. You're working in developing programmatic forms for that kind of situational VR, where you would be able to have the training of police or training of emergency services or training of a whole range of different services for a city or a state or a country. That's one element of VR.
No question about it. Well, understand that our brains were created 35 million years ago, in which we were hunters-gatherers. We ran or walked 30 miles a day, and we stitched all the things, all our memories, into our brains geologically as a part of the physical construct. And so, as a result, when you walk through the human body and learn the parts, you will remember it better than any other way, any other passive way, because now it becomes a scale. Don't you think it would be a lot more fun to walk around and listen to Thomas Jefferson and the founding fathers talking before they signed the Constitution? That's the sort of stuff. We're creating the holodeck. And once we have the holodeck, all bets are off. Now, let's talk about the downside. If I can be anybody I want in VR, why do I want to be my real person? You know? And I have a pretty good life, but I can think of lives I'd rather have.
I can see you as a Beyonce most beautifully.
Actually, that's kind of interesting. I've actually wondered what it'd be like to be a woman.
Right, of course.
You know?
Many men do, of course.
You know? Oh, boy, don't tweet that.
So Nolan, speaking about situational use of VR, one of the other areas that you've been exploring and you feel very optimistic about is the whole world of esports. And that fast-moving development, there's just a stadium just opened in Thailand recently that is an esports stadium exclusively for esports. We know here at Staples Center, they've had very successful tournaments of esports where the audience comes in and watches the esports players. But tell us how you're going to manifest this in esports.
We think that VR is going to be an interesting, different kind of sport. Think about an esport that requires you to be athletic, that actually requires you to be fit, that requires you to have stamina, that requires you to have strategy. Instead of a bunch of nerds in their basement in their underwear, all of a sudden we have people that are out in a stadium with thousands of cheering crowds, and they're running plays, and you can watch them in real life, or you can watch them in the virtual space, or you can watch through their point of view. Now that's cool.
Okay, so if you see the point of view of the audience, point of view of the player, let me give you an example. One of the best-selling series of novels over the last 10, 15 years has been Harry Potter, movies, amusement parks, and so forth. Would you be able to create Quidditch, the famous game born out of Harry Potter, such that people would be able to have this massive experience in an environment with Quidditch?
Absolutely.
How would you do it?
Oh, I would do it, but I'd change the rules. The rules suck. You know, I mean, why do you even have the blogger and the goals and all that sort of stuff when the little snitch is just going to dominate them? It's bad game design. So But I think the idea of riding around on broomsticks is really cool. I mean, you know, I want to ride around on a broomstick, and don't tweet that either.
But does this mean a whole new form of gaming architecture that comes into the VR framework? Because your whole notion of game theory and the construction of gamification, you were really one of the progenitors of this, not only in America, but on a global basis. How is this going to change? What would you advise creators in this audience or online around the world, how you feel this is going to change gaming architecture?
Get rid of your blinders. It's a whole new world. You've got to rethink everything. But there's certain things that are natural in game theory. First, you've got to balance risk and reward. In order to get a reward, you've got to take a risk. If you don't do that, the game becomes stupid and burns out. The second thing, you have to have clear objectives. One of the reasons that games are really fun is that life is complex and people are weird and it's hard to figure them out. In games, we're predictable. In games, we have a truncated rule set. We have a rule set that is understandable and tractable. That's satisfying.
And so this whole new world of developing things, let me ask you another interesting question that would have a bearing for everybody here today. When you first saw the first examples of Oculus, and this at the time, Mark Zuckerberg obviously picked up on it, $2.5 billion or thereabouts that he paid to acquire the company, or when you saw Vive, what did you think about this idea of people having a box on their head and then interacting with others in a gaming kind of environment? What was your initial view? Did you think that was good? Because now there's a company in San Francisco called Osterhout Design Group that have come up with not an Oculus box, but glasses that are like Ray-Bans or Oakleys that give you an incredible AR and VR experience. Just give us a sense of when you saw Oculus moving into this new era of glasses like this that will allow you the experience. What's your take on that?
Well, when I heard that Oculus was bought for $2 billion, I thought, damn, I should have done that. That was the first thing. Of course, this is coming from a guy, I turned down a third of Apple Computer for $50,000, which I've subsequently regretted. But at the same time, the idea is that in fact, I think I've got a slide in here. Let's see. Where is it? Here we go. I think this talk about virtual reality and augmented reality and reality is just a continuum. And that as we move forward, and I think it's less than 3 or 4 years ago, there'll just be a dial. And you can dial in how much reality you want and how much fantasy. And so you get up and you're really in a crabby mood and you just decide, I want to be 100% in virtual, where nobody's going to be mean to me. And then when you're working on a 747, you maybe want to have an augmented reality in which you dial it back. I think that there's a whole area of social play. Like, can you imagine a beer bar where everybody's in virtual reality? That's really dumb.
That's right.
Which I shouldn't do this. I'll get in trouble for it, but I'll do it anyway. Think about virtual beer goggles, so that you're in a bar and every girl that you meet is absolutely stunning. And she's digging your stick, you know? That's good stuff, right? No, sorry, okay.
So if you are having a look at what is now in place in the market, Oculus obviously being developed, Samsung and the phone companies in Asia Pacific trying to develop this as well, HTC with their Vive, the San Francisco company, Osterhout Design Group with their glasses. What do you think is going to be the optimum way forward to really accelerate this so that this is now, it becomes a really commercial element that people will buy and use, and it'll become a communal usage rather than something that's very isolated with a box on your head?
Well, I think that first of all, our bet is to go into malls and have people be able to go into a really good virtual reality experience for a few bucks. Atari was founded on coin-operated games in malls. And Chuck E. Cheese was all about an arcade for kids. And you have budgets and you have control of the environment in a public space that you don't have at home. That's not to say that the home isn't going to be important. It's just not going to be for us. You know, we want, I mean, quite frankly, do I want to compete with Sony? No. Do I want to compete with Facebook? No. I just want to do really good stuff that I can afford and can be really big. And, you know, I mean, we're going to get big enough and because we're cooler by definition. I hate to tell you that, but we always do that. But I think that what we want to do is to create really powerful tools to explore and experiment in alternative lifestyles, alternative experiences in terms, you know, I mean, think about how wonderful people would feel if they could just dial into a reality in which Trump weren't president. You know, there are a lot of people who would like that. And then there's a lot of people that would really be pissed about that, and they dial it back, you know. The question is, do you have a right to dial my dial?
Right.
You know, choose your reality.
So your team is here in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
You're working at an international level with people like Mac in Germany. Your goal is to be able to build these and these new styles of amusement park that is accessible.
Yeah, and my son is actually building a micro amusement park.
Bushnell.
Brent Bushnell. Yeah.
2-Bit Circus.
2-Bit Circus.
He just raised a lot of money for it.
He did. Boy, have I got cool kids. I mean, I really do. You're not supposed to, you know, brag about your kids on stage, but I really got cool kids. And
how many children do you have, Nolan?
I have 8.
8?
Yeah.
So do you wear your trousers back to front now?
Well, no, it was total intellectual arrogance. I decided that all the dumb people were having too many kids, and I wanted to balance the DNA.
Okay, so here's a closing thought as we have to try and finish this.
I'm sorry.
How
Okay,
do we
I've
get
got
there?
all
That's
kinds of
exactly
slides,
right.
but it doesn't
How do we get there? So here's the thought. The second largest sport in the world is rugby.
Right.
One of the fastest growing sports in the United States is rugby sevens. And there's some individuals in Los Angeles that have been growing this sport at an exponential rate over the last 10 years. Do you see, as an example, VR being used in a sport like rugby sevens to broaden this so that this becomes something that is popular and accepted and can drive that sport as another kind of way of an esports, VR, something?
No. VR is really bad at contact sports. And rugby, if anything, is a contact sport. I mean, the scrum is weird.
Right.
And you know, I can remember seeing my first rugby sevens in Hong Kong, and without a whole inch of alcohol, it was indiscernible to me.
But Quidditch is a different story.
It's a different story. Even though it's a bad game, I can fix that.
Right. So Nolan, 3 predictions from you, near term, medium term, what you see as this road going forward and how we get there. If people here in the audience were thinking about what they should be aware of as the imperatives of VR development, creativity, is there anything that you might suggest, 1 or 2 or 3 different elements that they should be aware of?
I'm going to phrase it a little different. My ask. I would love for several people here to get really close to a police department and create some software training for the situational awareness that's important in police training. There's a whole bunch of stuff that requires instant thinking. You almost have to train down to muscle memory. And I feel like we can, if we do it right, I think that we can train police officers and save a whole bunch of lives with the right software. I believe that if you understand OSHA and safety regulations and the kinds of things that kill people in the workplace or on an oil platform, write a game, write a VR environment using our system that can do that. And don't think about selling 99-cent apps on the cell phone. Think about selling $50,000 apps to a police department.
Great idea.
Very fundamental different marketplace. And you know, if you think there's a thousand amusement parks, there's probably 100,000 police departments, all of which need training, all of which need
Great idea.
the latest thing. The military. You know, there's a whole bunch of militaries all over the world that want to have situational awareness training. I just feel like we have so many things that we can do in VR that it can employ 100% of the people that are in this audience into seven-figure incomes. What are you waiting for? Get the hell out of here and start programming.
One final thought. If there's one individual that represents Hollywood, and Hollywood on a global scale, it's Steven Spielberg. He's making a movie right now.
Yes.
Let's finish on this theme, because Steven Spielberg, when he did artificial intelligence, that kind of set the scene for something in that field. Tell us about this movie, what it's called, and why you think this is going to influence the VR trajectory.
I like to think about things that are socially a singularity. And I think Ready Player One, when it hits the theaters...
Ready Player One's the name of the movie.
It's a book. It's all about video games played in a virtual reality, and it's a lot of nostalgia. The evil guy in the book and the movie is named Nolan. I know Ernie, and he's in big trouble for that. But at the same time, I think that it is going to present a very compelling singularity in the development of VR, AR, and the technology of the future. And I just think it's going to be very important.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it straight from the VR horse's mouth. Nolan, what a treat to have you here. Don't take those shoes off. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the great, great thinkers of our time, one of the great VR thinkers of our time. My name is Ralph Simon, and it's been such an honor and a privilege to be with Nolan. Nolan, we want you to keep succeeding as much as possible, because for you bringing us this joy, this wonder, the shock and awe in the best possible way, wow, you make life worth living. Ladies and gentlemen, Nolan Bushnell.
Thank you.
So, thank you to Nolan and Ralph. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay seated. Our next session will start momentarily. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Would love